Welcome back to the 17th episode of Ask Caroline, which I think these were started just over a year ago. I guess as had been reflected at the last one of these, we'd fallen out of the routine of the sessions, but it's clear from the number of questions that we continue to receive, and that more than 2,000 colleagues watched the last session, that there's clearly an appetite for us to continue with these. Caroline is happy to continue, and you'll see in today's daily brief that we've published dates for the future sessions for the rest of the year. The volume of questions we receive now means we can't realistically answer them all on screen, but Caroline has pledged that either herself or one of the other members of the Chief Exec team will answer each query, and will publish those answers on a page on the intranet. So, Caroline, welcome back. I guess I've been asked to sort of take this on an ongoing basis. So I did enjoy the last session, and I gather the reactions have been positive enough. So I will continue doing these until the colleagues in the NHS Grampian ask me to stop.
Me too.
So I guess before we get into the questions themselves, Caroline, is there anything you'd like to say just at the start of this session?
So thanks, Stephen, for taking up the mantle, if you like, of hosting these Q&A sessions, and actually really keen to say a massive thank you to Mike, who got these off the ground with me, and I'm sure I drove him absolutely mad with the lack of my diary availability and all of that sort of stuff. And I think it's great now that we're getting into a place of doing this on a monthly basis, so we can get the right questions. And Mike is going to be working with both yourself and me to get this right. So that's a huge thank you to him. Huge thank you to you, because I know it is a time commitment, and I'm sure, like Mike, you will take some jives from your colleagues around it, and I think that just goes with the territory. So don't underestimate the commitment that you're making around it. But actually, from a broader engagement piece, I've been pretty surprised as to how many people have actually engaged with this, and the number of colleagues that have said to me, it's been ages since you've done a Q&A, and the importance of it. So if our leadership job is to absolutely create a culture in NHS Grampian and wider about being a really engaged workforce, and everybody working together to achieve health and care and do what we want to do across NHS Grampian, then this is a really good platform for me to hear the things that are worrying you, and to be able to influence that in the privileged position that I hold, and more, hopefully encouraging a culture of resolving problems at their earliest stage, so that we can get that early resolution type thing to things that are niggling away and impacting on how pleasant it is to come and work here. So really looking forward to this. Can't believe it's the 17th, and let's see how it goes.
Okay, thanks, Caroline. So let's get into the questions. So I guess after the last Ask Caroline session, we received a host of messages in response to the discussion we had around paper payslips and the potential of an opt-in system. Recall that Paul Allen, Director of Facilities in the States, discussed this in the summer and looked into considering changes to an opt-in system for paper. But he said that there were logistical issues and I think some national regulations that were proving difficult for us to overcome. Caroline, are you aware of any progress on the issue, or would you be happy to press for one, given it's something a lot of staff clearly feel is both environmentally and financially the right thing to do?
Yeah, great question. And I think it would be fair to say in the last Q&A or where this came up, I was slightly frustrated about us not being able to do it. If we think about how most of us lead the vast majority of our interactions on a digital platform. So I believe there has been some progress, and I'm really pleased to say that. And I am hopeful that early in this financial year, we will understand exactly what it is that we need to do to transition to an opt-in process for payslips. And that's both about a convenience thing for colleagues, an access thing for colleagues. It's about a financial position, and it's about an environmental position. So within the first financial quarter, which takes us up to June, I will be looking for a very clear plan around how we're going to transition. Really importantly, for anybody that's listening and that is worried about that for any reason, it will be an opt-in to paper. So paper will still be available if, for whatever reason, that is necessary for you. That's the position. So I hope we won't have to answer another question around it, because it'll start to be self-evident. But if we're not seeing much shift by June, please ask me a question around it, and we'll understand what's got in the way. But that's the intention. Really important issue.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. Maury Blythe was one of those who got in touch, and she was also pointing out the environmental and cost impact of not having all departments on the e-expenses system yet as well. And another colleague had asked if we could consider making available an explainer for payslips and the various codes, deductions, etc., and perhaps have a link in the daily brief. Now, actually, for me, receiving these questions, the day before, we video these Ask Caroline episodes. I had a conversation separately with Lorraine Hunter from Payroll, who assures me that there is indeed an explainer on the intranet. So I guess that's somewhere on the on the payroll part of the intranet. So hopefully that link can be advertised, and your colleagues. It's important that colleagues understand what all the various different elements of the payslip mean. So
that's really good to, because let's face it, payslips are complicated.
Definitely. Okay, so the second question is from an anonymous admin staff member who says, I'm really concerned about the 3% savings that the Scottish Government are demanding all boards make. As our Finance Director said in his announcement recently, this amounts to the biggest savings target we've ever had to achieve in NHS Grampian. His commitment to protect patient services is welcome, but I'm concerned about the impact on vital support services. So many of these roles, from facilities and domestics to admin and secretarial, all provide essential work that allows the front line to get on with their jobs effectively. I also worry that by potentially under-resourcing these support roles, we will increase workloads for people on wards or in the community, which in turn could increase burnout amongst staff across the piece and decrease job satisfaction. Potentially ending up with much valued and experienced colleagues feeling they need to work elsewhere. Does Caroline share any of these concerns?
Thanks, Stephen. Sorry, was that an anonymous administrative colleague, or was there a name there? Anonymous.
Yeah, it's anonymous.
So, does Caroline share any of these concerns? Yep, I share all of these concerns, and I think they're all really valid points. And I think they're concerns that have been discussed and explored within the executive team and within the wider leadership and management structures. So in being concerned, that doesn't mean that that we haven't worked through. So how are we going to manage this in a way that we don't do what has just been described by this colleague? And so I suppose one of the first things I'm going to say is I'm really pleased that Alex, our finance director, message has got through around the 3% savings. So that's really good. So when he tells me he doesn't need to do videos, then I'll say, well, that's not the case, because it's clearly working. So that's really positive. The 3% is very ambitious, and that reflects the financial position of our health and care sector in Scotland. So it's absolutely not an easy issue to resolve. However, 3% is the minimum of that we believe we need to deliver, and 3% is what we've negotiated as potentially deliverable. That still leaves a significant financial gap for us to deal with. So I'm not going to be able to go any lower than 3%. I do think there are efficiencies in our system that we can make savings, and actually the last question relating to payslips would be one way of how do we look at our systems and processes and, without impacting negatively on colleagues, actually make a difference. There's lots of things that we can look on from the past to ensure we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, and I absolutely believe that we want to be a learning organisation, so learning from the things that we've done. And that is really important, to be able to learn from the things that haven't gone so well and learn from the things that have gone so well, and not to be frightened of getting things wrong. So what we absolutely know is that every decision that is made has an impact and consequence on another part of the system. And so in relation to reducing potentially aspects of administrative functions, and actually that work still needs to be done, then who picks that up? So we've done that in the past, and it's absolutely not the intention to do that again. And therefore the processes that we are putting around these savings are involving the whole system. So making sure that everybody is around the decisions that are being made, and we understand the impact and consequences. So there's a group called the Value and Sustainability Group, which is chaired by colleagues in managerial roles, with that wide membership around it. And we are then identifying leads for each of the efficiency savings, so that we're really clear about what it is that we're going to do. We understand what the risks are. We avoid any bear traps around it. And most importantly, we keep you informed of what we're doing. So it's a new process that Alex is putting in place. I think it's the best one we've got, and we will learn as we go, and welcome any feedback as you experience this. But I hope that we have recognised the concerns that you've raised, and we have mitigated them as best we can.
Yep, thanks, Caroline. Okay, the third question is from another anonymous staff member based at Aberdeen Royal Infirmary, and they're asking, why is there no on-site pharmacist in Aberdeen Royal Infirmary that provides service until 5 p.m. at the weekend to help with discharges? The colleague says, I've run into issues discharging patients, which has an impact on flow. By way of an example, on a Sunday afternoon, the pharmacy medications aren't dispensed after 1 o'clock, which can delay a discharge by as much as 24 hours. Is this something Caroline could look into?
Yeah, so not the first time I've been asked this question. Perhaps it is on this forum, but not the first time I've been asked it. And our colleague Sandy, who is the lead for pharmacy, has absolutely described to me the challenges of workforce, and we've all experienced that, and trying to make sure that he and the team put the right colleagues on where the demand exists. However, I do think that there's an opportunity for us to reflect on that with Sandy and with pharmacy colleagues, to understand, in light of the pathway redesign that we are about to undertake, and the pattern of discharge in our system, is that still the right model? And make sure that if it needs to be amended, then we do that with colleagues in pharmacy, with those that are administering, prescribing and dispensing medications. We absolutely need to do everything possible to ensure we can support patients to go home as soon as they are possibly ready to do so. And so I think it's a valid question. I think that the current rationale is about matching the workforce in pharmacy with the demand of dispensing. And I'm sure Sandy and colleagues will be up for what do we need to do to work within the kind of new pathways and the demand profile. And I think they're pretty agile around that, actually. But I understand your frustration, and I think it's something that the work through, probably I think through the Unscheduled Care Programme Board, which is doing all the work relating to discharge without delay, will pick up. So watch this space and see where we get to. But pharmacy work incredibly hard to try and meet the demand that we create in the system.
Okay, thanks, Caroline. So question 4 is from Claire Wilson, who's based at ARI as well. And Claire asks, the recent expansion and addition of the new bike sheds instead of personal bike lockers is a welcome addition to the Forest Rail site. Would it not make sense to replace all the personal bike lockers, which are fully allocated and I believe are vastly underutilised, with more of the communal bike shed options, giving staff greater choice in their mode of transport?
So that's nice to get some positive feedback, Claire. Thank you for that. I'm sure Chantal and the team will be pleased, and I'm also delighted to hear that we're continuing to increase our use of bikes in and out of work. That's great news. So I wonder if what we need to do is be creating more of these bike sheds if they are appropriate. I think there's definitely a piece of work for Chantal and colleagues to do about underutilised lockers and make sure we've got that right in relation to the turnover and how that's allocated and how that's managed. But from an environmental perspective, I wonder if rather than getting rid of lockers that we've already put in, if the better way forward is more of the open bike racks that you're describing, is just to put more of them in place. So I think that's probably the ask that I would be making of Chantal and colleagues, is if the demand exists for more of these, rather than taking anything away, let's make sure what we've got is used properly and add in more of the thing that is preferred. So great point to raise, and thanks for the positive feedback. Always nice.
Thank you. So the next one is a long one that probably needs a bit of context. So this is from Kate Wensley, who is a senior doctor in plastic surgery. And Kate's been in touch after the question and discussion that we had last time about whether it was fair that doctors in training are paid for their lunch when other staff aren't. In summary, Kate writes that she's disappointed that the question was broadcast, and says it is unfortunate that we were not previously aware that doctors in training are paid for their breaks. She notes that you and I were going to look into it offline, and clarifies that it is a new deal. It's a terms and conditions requirement agreed, in relation to the doctors, and of course that's different from other groups of staff. I guess Kate was also disappointed to hear the questioner's views that were expressed around doctors in training, the monitoring process. And so again, it's a contractual process. Kate finishes by saying, and I'll obviously summarise this here, but I'm sure you will consult with senior medical staff on this matter, but I'd be most grateful if a correction could be provided to the previous questioner's assertions. Whilst I'm very supportive of staff who feel undervalued in their position, I strongly feel that undermining staff in other roles in the NHS Grampian is neither constructive nor appropriate. So would you like to comment, Caroline?
Yeah, absolutely. Kate, thanks for getting in touch. And gosh, what a pertinent time to still be talking about T's and C's and how that's affecting colleagues. So if I start off with the end request there, which is to revisit if there was any undermining of T's and C's from the question that was raised, and indeed in my response. And so absolutely, however my response was heard, that was not the intention. In fact, Kate, one of your colleagues reached out to me quite soon after that, and we had a good conversation back and forth by email, and I was able to offer if it would be supportive to meet actually with doctors in training just to understand any issues. However, that was declined, but that offer still stands for all colleagues actually. If anybody would like me to come and meet in person, I'm happy to do that, and it's really important. So I think if I can recall the question and the conversation, my perspective on it was, and this forum actually is that we absolutely need to hear different perspectives, and this is a really good way to get issues that are bubbling away or issues that people do feel uncomfortable about or don't understand to actually air that. But none of that should be done in a way that makes individuals feel compromised. So I think how we ask these questions is really important. And if it's from a place of understanding or seeking to understand, then that is the right thing. As far as my views on the T's and C's of medics, and which includes obviously rota monitoring, then that's the terms and conditions that we work with. And my inference, or indeed my sense in my last question, was, what more do we need to do to make sure that everybody, including medical colleagues, are getting breaks, and the importance of that. And Stephen hopefully will be able to say a little bit about the group that's been established around that. And then what are the working conditions that we need for colleagues to actually be encouraged to join the NHS, and indeed to be retained in the NHS. So it was much more probably from a perspective of actually perhaps everybody should be getting paid for their lunch break, as opposed to let's stop doing some of the stuff that is good, that is positive in the work that we are doing. Clearly, with all of this, there are cost implications. There are partnership conversations to work through. These are national terms and conditions. However, in light of the current dialogue with professional groups, with unions, with the government around our terms and conditions, there is a really good opportunity for us to actually think about what is it that we want to achieve for doctors, really importantly for doctors in training, and for all other colleagues, most of who are on Agenda for Change. The government have now committed to a review of Agenda for Change, and then those that are on executive and managerial pay scales. So that's kind of 3 different sets of terms and conditions. So thanks for raising the question again, Kate. None of the question or the answer was posed to undermine or to diminish the contribution of any colleagues, but actually getting some of the stuff out on the table that bubbles away in conversations and people don't know all the facts around. I think that's really important. And again, happy to come and meet with some of you and your colleagues. I think you said, will I be engaging with senior medical staff? Every day I engage with senior medical staff, but actually around this issue, I think it's about engaging with doctors in training, and really understanding your perspectives. So hopefully that answers your question. And Stephen, can you just say a little bit about the group that was looking at breaks and things like that?
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. So, yeah, the joint working group, which has been established jointly by Grampian Area Partnership Forum, which is the sort of employee relations sort of committee in NHS Grampian, or one of them, and also the area clinical forum. So you sort of 2 strands of the advisory structure, if you like. I've come together and set up a group on staff breaks, rest and recovery. So you're particularly in the latter stages of the COVID pandemic response, it's been recognised that there really is a challenge around staff being able to and feeling as if they've got the permission to take breaks during particularly during their working shifts. So that group, it's been in the works for a while. I'm pleased to say that, and I think by the time this gets broadcast, we will be meeting before the end of March. So the first meeting of that group, and we've got members of those 2 sort of advisory committees, but we've also got sort of subject matter experts or sort of topic specialists who are also helping us out, including we've got 2 colleagues who are representing doctors in training who are participating in the group, as well as colleagues from workforce, operational HR, the We Care programme, etc. So it's the timing of these questions is useful, and I would agree with everything you've said, Caroline. But hopefully this joint working group will actually deliver some new ideas and actually initiate some positive changes for all staff.
Well, that's really good. I wonder if Stephen, I wonder if just for any doctors in training that are watching this and want to know how to connect into that, if we could just get the names of, I don't know if it's Kim Milne or who it is that's around that group, but just so that they know if they want an issue raised on their behalf, then they know who to contact. So maybe we could get Mike to put in the brief around that.
Great. Yeah. Okay. So the next question is from an anonymous senior healthcare support worker who writes, can I ask, with the Band 2s getting rebanded to Band 3, what does this mean for the Band 3s that have been doing their role for a long time and it has progressed out with the job description, that these Band 3 existing staff started off with? Are they going to get recognised and be rebanded as a Band 4?
Thank you for the question. So, the evaluation and regrading of colleagues from a Band 2 to a Band 3 was a national piece of work, and what a great piece of work actually to recognise and acknowledge the contribution of all healthcare support workers. So it's my understanding, and if I get this wrong, somebody will tell me very quickly, it's my understanding that that was purely focused on the transition from Agenda for Change Band 2 to Agenda for Change Band 3. And that's predominantly where the vast majority of our healthcare support worker colleagues sit in our career pathway and pay scale. However, you raise a really valid question about the continued development of other roles in our health and care system. And we've got a number of colleagues who work at a higher level of practice, and that is remunerated at Agenda for Change Band 4. And I think that's more and more what our workforce will need to look like, having that career pathway from Agenda for Change Band 2 to Band 3 to Band 4. And then for those that want to move on beyond that, then creating the opportunities for that. So it's not part of the national work. However, I think any colleague that feels that their job has evolved and it is necessary that it has evolved, it's not just individuals doing what they would prefer to be doing. But I think if the part of the organisation that people work in requires that of them, then we need to go through the process that looks at the appropriate remuneration of those colleagues. And I know that June Brown, our nurse director, is incredibly focused on career progression and different opportunities. And we have a range of Agenda for Change Band 4 roles now in the organisation. So I think that it's not a national direction as the Band 2 to Band 3 thing was, but there is definitely career progression. We need to make those really viable and attractive. And I would imagine that June and the team are working around that. So perhaps there's some sort of update that can be given at a future date. But there's not a national direction as there was for the Band 2, Band 3 work. But I think the importance of having that career progression is exactly where we want to be.
Okay, that's great. So the next question comes from another anonymous colleague who is described as an NMAP, which is nurse, midwife, or allied health professional. So I assume it's one colleague, so I don't know which of that variety of disciplines they come from. But the colleague writes, when trying to access CampusMoodle, which is the RGU University's online portal, when trying to access that via my NHS Grampian desktop computer, I was blocked by a firewall. Upon requesting the firewall to be unblocked, IT colleagues explained that this is a long-standing decision taken by IT and information governance, and that I should use a personal device instead. A colleague continues, I feel let down and frustrated by this response.
Thanks for that. Sorry, the reception just dipped out a little bit there. Did we have a name for this colleague, or was it anonymous?
No, this is an anonymous colleague.
Okay. I just didn't want to be rude and not respond with their name. So let's revisit that. I can understand your disappointment, and we've gone, our IT colleagues and information governance colleagues have gone a huge way over the past couple of years to overcome barriers to accessing the right systems. And so I think that this would require a specific answer in relation to how we address this. And so if you don't mind, I'll get contact from IT directly made with you, because I think we have definitely moved on significantly in our firewalls, etc., and our expectation of professional responsibility and trust. And we just need to keep developing that. And so let me make connections. That will probably be Mike that does that on your behalf. But let's get that resolved if that is possible. But there's been huge progress around that in recent years. But rather than me trying to answer the question, let's get the experts around it to give you the right answers.
Thanks, Caroline. Okay, the next question is from Dawn Marr, who's a clinical and nurse specialist. And Dawn asks if there is any scope for additional motorbike parking on NHS Grampian sites. So I think there was maybe a question a bit like this asked previously.
It was, and I can't remember what I said. Can you remember what I said?
I think there was a previous commitment that with any future parking review, it would absolutely be. I'm sure. So Dawn has asked about motorbike parking. Certainly, I'm aware of a number of colleagues, who are motorcyclists. So, including one of my very good partnership rep colleagues, Mike Adams. So,
let's. The work around parking, I know is Paul Allen is in discussion about the best timing for that, and absolutely, irrespective of how you commute to work, we need to ensure that we are creating the right conditions for you to safely leave your vehicle. So I absolutely don't know the answer to that directly, but if there was a commitment made in the previous answer around making sure that we are inclusive of all vehicle users as opposed to the most prominent, which would obviously be car, then let's pay attention to that. So Paul will see this, he watches this, and will be able to come back with any progress update. But I know that Paul has been working hard with colleagues around the provision of car parking to make sure our work to revisit that, as we know we have to do, is not going to be detrimental to how colleagues are feeling in light of current pressures. So Paul is best placed to give us an update on that. There should be absolutely no detriment to any individual in how they choose to come to work. And I know that will be on Paul's radar, but perhaps that work just hasn't progressed as yet. So we'll hopefully get a bit of an update in the brief from Paul.
Okay, thanks, Caroline. And this next question is around parking as well. And so this question relates to an item that was in the daily brief on the 23rd of November 2022, which feels like quite a long time ago. But it was around about the multi-storey car park on the Forest Hill site. So that's the Lady Helen Parking Centre. And although initially, so the extract from the daily brief is, although that was initially developed as a patient-only facility, controls of the multi-storey car park have been relaxed. You may park there as a member of staff provided you use level 6 and above only. Lower floors must be kept available for patients and or visitors, especially those with limited mobility. If you as a staff member are coming on site for an appointment or to escort someone else to an appointment, you should still park in level 6 or above. Please help us keep this valued facility open and available to all who need to use it. So that's from the daily brief. And the question for Caroline is why, so much as why are NHS Grampian staff being penalised for attending in a non-staff capacity?
Yeah, a good question, isn't it? And of course, of course we shouldn't be penalising colleagues who of course have to use our services like anybody else. So I think this absolutely has to be about doing the right thing and trusting people to do the right thing, and recognising that we absolutely want to make sure access is preserved for those that need it, and that's both colleagues that work, access to parking, colleagues that work in our system, and also colleagues that have to attend as relatives or as patients themselves. So I think that the only thing I can respond to here is to actually say I believe that we should be trusting all colleagues to do the right thing. And if that means that they are attending as a patient or as a relative supporting a patient, then they make the right decision about where they park, and we trust them to do that. That's the way to build trust and the way to get people to I think engage in the right process. So let's trust, recognising that we have a great facility in the car park, and the way in which we have managed through the pandemic to negotiate using, can't remember what floors it is, I think floor 6 and above for staff parking, which is really important. Then, however, recognising that colleagues are also patients and are also relatives. So let's trust that nobody will abuse that, and use their discretion appropriately when they require to park as a patient or as a supporting relative for a patient.
Yep. Thanks, Caroline. So next one is an anonymous question, and it asks, what is being done to address the pay arrears for those staff who were employed during the negotiation period? So I guess this must be agenda for change, during the negotiation period, but they left their post before the pay rise being finalised. This individual's heard different answers and mixed messages, and they're hoping that Caroline can help get an answer.
Okay, so this would be relating to Agenda for Change colleagues, for colleagues who are employed under Agenda for Change T's and C's, and everybody will be appropriately remunerated back to, where are we now? We're in 2023. So back to April 2022, which is when I believe, although actually, Stephen, you might know more about this than me, when I believe that the pay award is being considered from. So all colleagues who were employed, whether they have changed roles or whether they have left the organisation, will be appropriately remunerated from April 22 until their cessation of contract or change of contract. I would imagine that our payroll colleagues are working through that process, and that the colleagues that have left the organisation will be contacted very soon, because I can see how they're working through all of these staff groups. So you will be remunerated. There's no debate about that. The timing of that will just be about the volume of work that our payroll colleagues are absolutely trying to get through. And I know from other conversations that I am hoping that they will have concluded that understanding, because they need to write out to people if they've left the organisation. They need to agree that bank details, etc., remain the same. But everybody will be appropriately remunerated for the back pay from April 20, I'm losing my years here, April 22. And it might just be a timing issue, but I can't re-emphasise the scale of the work that our payroll colleagues are having to work through is significant. So I would suggest, as we're coming up to the end of this financial year, it will get resolved pretty quickly, but it will definitely be addressed and you will be appropriately paid.
Yeah. Thanks, Caroline, for that reassurance. Second last question, and this is from Jonathan Brodie. And Jonathan says, many private and public employers, including councils in Scotland and NHS trusts in England, support salary sacrifice schemes for the purchase of personal electrical vehicles for commuting to work and for personal use. It seems NHS Grampian currently only supports this when the vehicle is specifically used for work-related travel. Could NHS Grampian enrol in a scheme to support all staff purchasing electric vehicles? The expense of purchasing larger capacity, more efficient vehicles is otherwise prohibitive.
An interesting question, and thanks, Jonathan, for that. And to be blunt, I don't know the answer. So rather than faff about and pretend that I do, I think that we absolutely can get Paul Allen. I was going to see if I could get through one Q&A without giving Paul a job from it, but we'll get Paul Allen to tell me the answer to that. And I suppose the things that we have to have in mind is that we are constrained in some regards, hugely fortunate in others, but constrained in some regards that we are not a private organisation that is profit making, that supports different elements of being able to do work like this. We are very much a person-centred organisation, but we are a public sector organisation, and we are most definitely not making a profit for anybody that had missed it. So let me ask Paul, of course, if there are schemes that we can engage in, then we absolutely will. And Paul will be best placed to answer that. So perhaps we can get something for Paul to put in writing to just firm that up. But being a public sector organisation has its absolute benefits, but it also does have its limitations in regards to how far we can stretch some of this. But you've asked the question, so let's find out the answer and see where we go from there.
Okay, thanks. And the last question that's on the list is from Leanne Chatwood. And Leanne is a third-year midwifery student and a bank healthcare support worker, and spends much of her work time at Inverurie maternity unit. So she's asking, Caroline, can you please provide an update on the situation with the birthing pools in Inverurie? They've been out of action for a long time now, and although a great deal of money has been spent on replacing the old pools, they are still not active.
Yeah, how frustrating, both for colleagues that are working there and for the women that would benefit hugely from using them. It would be fair to say, like many of my colleagues, I am exasperated by our inability to resolve this issue more quickly. That's not through any fault of anyone. It's just where we find ourselves. So I wonder, rather than me waffling on about getting an update on that, I certainly have no line of sight of the timeline of how we're doing that. So what I mean by that is it's constantly on my radar, but nobody has said to me that we now have a plan that's going to allow us to open it. We don't appear to be able to resolve the issues that caused it to close in the first place. So my suggestion is that we just get an update from one of the team in that area and we pop it in the brief. But good question, and I am constantly frustrated about not being able to give access to birthing pools for women when they can have such a positive impact. So really good question. I'm not going to pretend I can answer the most up-to-date position on it. So let's get somebody to do that, and hopefully Mike will be able to put it in the brief.
Okay, so Caroline, that's the end of this month's questions. Thanks again for your time, and thanks again for the manner in which you field the questions and are content to either give answers where you've got some, and equally identify those situations where we need to find the answer from other colleagues or elsewhere. So I guess just a reminder for people that are watching, the schedule for the next. Certainly the rest of this year, and I think actually rolling into next year, the schedule for the next episodes of these are published in the Daily Brief. And yeah, just thanks again for your time, and for colleagues watching, thanks for taking the time to watch this.
No, thank you, and thank you for taking the time to field the questions to me. Really important, and just encourage colleagues to ask questions. There's no such thing as a daft question. In fact, they're usually the ones that I can't answer. And so just encourage everyone to keep participating in it, and we will make sure that we try and get back to all questions. Some of them will not be in the brief, but we try to be, I think, certainly the way that Mike handled it, and I'm sure you'll be the same, Stephen, is let's get to the nub of things that matter, and that doesn't always mean the easiest of questions. So no, it's I think it appears to be landing well, so that's great. Let's keep doing it until it's not landing well.
That's great. Thanks again.